Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and attach our piping to the decorative top piece. And we're going to, I'm using a Teflon foot. We're going to sew just along the edge. If I need my hump jumper, I'm going to sink my stitch. And then we'll give it a go. And just along the edge. So let's go. Once it gets going, it's nice and level. Take your time. And I'm using a regular, 3.5 inch stitch length on this. And now, all we're going to do before we give her a haircut, is we're going to basically fold this back so that the piping is against the edge of the front panel. So it's not gonna, you don't fold it back to where you sewed, but you're gonna fold it back so that it's on the lip of that piping. And you can go ahead and we'll put some clips in there just to hold it in place, make sure it's all even. You want the same amount of piping all the way around. Hopefully you can see. Okay, so now we have our pretty piece. There's the piping is just peeking out, just the amount of the cording. I'll do a few clips here. Now, we're going to take our front lining piece and we're going to match up the top edge. Put a couple of clips in there just to hold it in place. If you wanted to, you could put some double-sided tape down in this area. Don't put it up here because we're going to cut this away in a little bit. So we're going to be brave and not do any double-sided tape, and we're going to top stitch this on. So increase your stitch length to about 4.5. I'm using the same foot. I'm just going to use the edge of the black vinyl as my guide and keeping my piping even. We'll go ahead and we'll sink the stitch and use my hump jumper to make sure it's even to get it started. And we're going to go. A little bit more hump jumper, a little bit more. Okay, now she's even, and we are kind of just holding the piping in place and going straight along the edge using our foot, our Teflon foot, as a guide. Make sure it doesn't poke out. all the way to the end. And voila, we have a beautiful piping. Nothing showing from behind, just looks lovely. And that is as hard as that was. So when we get back to our desk, we will come back here and trim away this excess fabric here. And then we will have our front that we will need to add our badge to. I'll put my badge here. So that looks great. Good job. I'm very happy with that. It's pretty. Let's go ahead and move on to the lining. I'll put this piece over here. So we have our lining piece all ready to go. We'll go ahead and put our stitch length back to about 3.5. And we're going to stitch just on the very edge like we did before. Sink our stitch, put a hump jumper if you need it. Okay. And we're just sewing along the edge. Make sure you got the edge. Okay. So the piping is attached to the top. Make sure. It happens sometimes. And now we're going to take the bottom. We're going to go right sides together. And we're going to, first I'm going to get rid of all these excess strings. Okay. So just going to match up the top raw edges. I'm sure you've done this a million times. We're just making a tube. That's going to be our slip pocket. So we're matching up the top edges, basically encasing the piping. Like so. A few more clips for good measure. Now I'm not sewing on vinyl anymore. Make sure this is all even on this side. So I'm going to pop in my favorite foot. And we're going to sew. Now you can either feel it for the piping. You can use a piping foot if you wanted to, or you can just use the previous seam allowance as a guide. I'm going to do that. So I think it's pretty much going to be right as that. That's my guide as my foot. And I'm putting my stitch length back to a 3.5. So you definitely want your piping to be fully encased, unlike what we did before. A little bit of a different technique. You can feel it with your fingers though. And if we turn it and we decide that the piping has not been fully encased, guess what? We can turn it again, sew it a little bit closer. But I think we're going to be okay. We shall see. Get rid of all these strings. So we're just going to turn our little tube. You can see that. Voila, we have piping. And it's really more of a decorative binding, I guess, than piping in a way, but I think it's just going to make the bag really pop. So we're going to give this a press. You can, after you press it, you can top stitch it right along the top of there, just to, if you want to seal it. We are going to be, we are going to be dividing this to hold a size for a phone pocket and maybe a lipstick, but I need to press it before I can top stitch it. So just remember to top stitch it if that's what you want to do.